Hello, friends. So I've been getting a lot of requests to just make a tier list because it's very easy to read, right? So today I thought we'd kind of have a fun day and make a tier list of all the 6 stars, but it's going to be a 3-in-1. So I'm going to cover patch 3.2, then patch 3.3, and patch 3.4. Now, tier lists are very subjective, in my opinion. If you want an archetype based video, I made one up to 3.3 that took about 100 hours of creating sims and making the video. But having played all these patches, the conditions I want to base my tier list around is mostly to do with the portrait zero meta. And that consists of a number of factors, right? The character's overall strength relative to their archetype. And more importantly, this becomes, I think, a lot more important going forward. The usability of that character in endgame for that specific patch. It doesn't matter if like you're strong if you don't have very many environments to be strong in. So those environments would be reveries and wailing well, and Main's Bulletin, and in 3.3, it's going to be Tides of Thought included there as well. Um, in 3.2, since we're transitioning from the patch where 500 meters and Wailing Well was introduced, it remains relevant. But as we move on to 3.3 and 3.4, it's less likely that that will be the case. So keep that in mind. Basically, I'm going to try and be as quick as possible since we initially have like 50 characters to get through. And then as we move through the patches, it'll just be that patch's new release and Euphoria's. And since it's going to be unscripted, I'll try to go back and timestamp as much as I can, but no assurances. Okay, so let's go. Let's turn on some music for us, right? Get in the mood. Get in the mood for a tier list. All right. Okay. So you see here 3.2, and then I've kind of provided a little descriptor underneath the tiers itself, you know, to keep you aware of what each bracket means. Okay. So, starting with Druvis, I would say Druvis is a core part of the rank up archetype. She has a ton of role compression, right? Being able to CC, debuff, damage amp. Just an excellent Euphoria overall. She's a tier 1 unit in my opinion. The reason why she's brought down slightly is that the rank up team is not that top echelon when it comes to DPT, right? So moving on, we got E2 Lilia, right? E2 Lilia. She just doesn't see any use at all anymore. She's been severely power crept. So tier 3. Then Euphoria A Knight. I would put in, yeah, T2, right? Rarely sees use out of the sort of turn 1 farming of dailies. And then in Reveries, just the alternatives outshine him far too much, basically in all endgame content. And then we have Sotheby, who is on the high end of tier 3 probably. Her healing throughput is just not enough, and you're always playing from behind, right? And the position in the poison team is very limited to like, for her especially, it's very limited to like 100 meters, between 100 to 400 meters, right? Now we have Euphoria Regulus. And Regulus is definitely a tier 1 unit. Very strong Euphoria, and pretty much the go-to third support in the impromptu lineup. She just sees use in all of the impromptu reveries and also 800 meters. Okay. Then Euphoria Centurion is another tier 2. She's not unusable, but another case of like the alternatives simply being better than her Euphoria as a main DPS. You know, it is what it is. And then we have E1. Remember, this is E1 and Lee. It's a very old Euphoria. She's just a super niche negative status unit. So not a lot of people use this Euphoria since the 4-star and the 3-star alternatives just work fine in reveries, right? So it's costly to invest into it. So not a lot of people to actually take advantage of her. And then we have Medpark. He's still a very strong sustain for all stages of the game, right? If you use him correctly, if you outfit him correctly with the proper resonances and psi cubes, but the cracks in power creep are starting to show, obviously, right? Consider him as sort of a filler unit or a stepping stone before Marsha. So I would say he's on the sort of lower end of tier 1. Okay. Then we have Euphoria Voyager. I think Regulus is vastly superior to Voyager in an endgame environment, right? Especially in 3.2 or 3.1 for that matter. Still has that amazing utility with her ult with the seal ability, right? For reveries, so very low end of tier 1, right? I won't even put her up here since I don't want to drag it back and forth. And then we have Euphoria Eternity. Euphoria Eternity is the poor man's, or the E2 rather, is the poor man's blood type DPS. And then her E1, I hate to say it, but contributes, you know, less than 10%, I would say, as a support option for Nautica. So definitely a tier 2 unit for sure. Maybe slightly higher than Centurion if you include her E2, right? And then we have New Babel. Euphoria New Babel, another very old Euphoria, much weaker. The first iteration, I would say, of Marsha. Her multipliers just don't work for the AP that she has to expend in order to shield, right? So she would be, you know, I think here would be sort of correct for the time being. Okay. And then Toothfairy as well, another sustain. Once a premier unit, right? That just happened to get power crept, right? I would still put her above New Babel for now. Okay. And then we have E2 Jessica. Very strong unit to cheese reveries with until Wailing Well, right? That's currently her niche. And she does very well in that niche if you actually end up getting her E2. Probably one of the highest tier 2 units, I would say. Then Melania, E1 Melania, a flexible buff unit. Can fit into so many teams beyond just the ritual team itself, right? With Recoleta, has Moxie Drain, has Moxie Storage, just very strong in Reveries and Wailing Well. High end of tier 1, for sure. Then her partner in crime, Pickles, who is the sort of Dispel specialist. I would say he's on the higher end of like tier 1. Tier 2. He can't solve everything, but he is very useful. Okay. Then E1 Marcus, Euphoria Marcus. Until we get Euphoria Mercuria, she is sort of the gold standard for rank up, right? AoE, continuous action, very strong in Reveries. So definitely, excuse me, definitely tier 0.5, or the lower end of tier 0.5. And then we have 37, right? Just stopped being utilized once the impromptu archetype was finalized. She's about tier 3. I would say she's stronger than New Babel, right? She sees more use than New Babel. Then we have Kala Bona. Kala Bona, who got her Euphoria this patch. Let me just think. Towards the higher end of tier 2, probably. Not quite as useful as Jessica. Only useful. Her Euphoria is only useful with Euphoria Anjanala. And then we have Euphoria Shemaine. Very outdated Euphoria that just sees no use whatsoever. Tier 3. Then we have Spathidia. Likely candidate for a Euphoria update coming up soon. Same thing, basically. Outdated in tier 3. Then we have E2 and E1 Ezra, who can support the Blood Tithe team as well as the Dynamo team. He's used to cheese a lot of Reveries if he's like available in the Euphoria pool. As a sustain option, though, he just gets power cracked by Kefirina, and more recently, Robuska, right? So middle of tier 2. Yeah, still useful, but pretty niche. And then we have Windsong, another, I would say, tier 2 unit. Yeah, I think this is a good position. Not really an environment to use her in is the problem. Then 6. 6 can be interesting to use. He's probably middle. Next to NN Lee sounds fitting, right? Just doesn't see any use at the moment. Buffs and debuff multipliers are just not worth the ramp time that it takes, right? Then we have everybody's favorite, Kakanya. I would say that she's like the very bottom at P0, the very bottom of tier 1 still. Still viable in Reveries and Wailing Well should you be missing a sustain or need that extra bit of mitigation. And then we have Euphoria Isolde, right? 3.2 Euphoria unit. Core to the Lingering Glow archetype. Very strong. strong, but very good Euphoria update in terms of her buffing capabilities. Her play style, though, is still a little frustrating, right? Where you have to keep reapplying her debuff, right? Debuff management aspect, not that great. And also her solo usage outside of the Lingering Glow archetype with Beryl, not too great either. So upper end of 0.5 purely on the fact that she is an updated Euphoria that's part of a meta archetype, right? Then we have Ju. Let me think. Probably to the lower end of tier 2. Usable but niche. And then we have Getian. E1 Getian. A lot of Euphoria characters. Very strong ritual support unit. Strong array. Probably to the high end of middle to higher end of tier 1. And Lucy, one of my favorite characters, remains dominant in sort of like reveries, still usable in Wailing Well, is also viable in some mains bulletin stages, especially since it's mostly spirit-based ones. Lower end of 0.5. Much higher than Marcus though, in my opinion. When she's able to utilize her reap. And then Euphoria Villa, one of my favorite sustains in the game. The throughput that she has is very strong. She has cleanse when she ults. She has mitigation through her healing ability itself. And then she has damage amp and moxie feed. So definitely on the higher end, probably the highest, one of the highest tier 1 units. Right. Euphoria Semawise is core to the Blood Tithe archetype. Just performs very well solo as well through reveries. She's going to be sort of next to Zold for the most part, I think. Okay. Then we have Jay. Right. Jay, strong kit, but it's just outdated. It's just outdated. It is what it is. Strong within the tier 3 bracket, I think. If you do actually use him. Okay. Now we have Akuria. A lot of role compression in this character. Still a solid buffer overall across multiple archetypes, whether it's rank up or impromptu or just in general. About middle of tier 1. Middle to lower middle of tier 1. I haven't really decided here yet. And then Euphoria Argus. Huge Euphoria update for Argus, right? Pinpoint, which is her S2 debuff, right? One of the strongest reveries debuffs out there. Yeah, one of my favorite characters. Yeah, I think that's a good position for Argus. And we have Tuesday. She's still a great unit. Tuesday is still a great unit, and even until 3.0, people were still kind of working to get her, right, with how strong she is in certain compositions, especially the assassination poison build, right? Her array is absurd, extremely strong. It's just a case of lacking the environments right? Higher than Voyager, I would say she's in tier 1 though. Pretty exceptional unit. And then Anjanala, E1 Anjanala, we just got her. Very strong unit. So many opportunities to be utilized in 3.2, whether it's like, you know, reveries. And she's the core duo that shows the best P0 performance in the game across the board. Very easy to play as well. Probably one of the top units in tier 0.5 at the moment. Okay. Then we have Lopera. Lopera is still a very strong support. I just without an environment, like a specific environment, she's like a middle ground for a lot of things. In 3.2, I think she's somewhat close to yeah. No. I think she's okay to be placed right here. She's very usable, but like we tend to pick the core alternatives for that, for whatever archetype we're saying we're playing. Sorry. And then we have Willow. Now Willow just isn't great, right? She's a pure damage over time applicator, while also having like no burst whatsoever to back that up. We're just not in a state of the game where you can delay damage without being punished, basically, right? It's also like a manual sort of application, which is outdated at this point. You need to have some kind of like auto actions going in order to be able to maintain some semblance of DPT. And then Flutter Page, right? The most universal character in the game, right? Absurd follow-up attack buffs as well as continuous action. In 3.2, she's used in so many different compositions. She's core in a lot of different compositions, that is. She's used in like Lingering Glow, she's used in Corvus and Brume. Brume's variation of Dynamo. High end of tier 0, right? High end of tier 0. Extreme amounts of compression as well as longevity, just due to the fact that Blue Park likes to develop a lot of follow-up attack-based characters. Amazing unit, basically, even at P0. Now we have Barcarola. She is, I would say she's like middle of 0.5, right? The DPT of the impromptu composition remains absolutely relevant even to this day. Extremely strong impromptu support unit, and probably the main driver of the Star Impromptu, like the source of the damage, right? Moving pretty decently quick here. For 2-2, one of the most role compressed units out there, right? She has damage share or spirit link. She has the auto cleanse on her debuff card and her on her follow up. She has follow up attack buffs. She's used in 3.2 as like the primary Lingering Glow sustain, right? I mean, a lot of it's a toss up between Kiparina and Fatutu, but Fatutu is better when it comes to overall output. Um, she's also the main support for Brume's Dynamo as well. Forever, pretty much, right? So I would place her probably at the highest position in 0.5. She's not tier 0, though. Okay. And then we have Liang Yue. She didn't really have any longevity whatsoever, right? Outside of her niche of 400 meter dash one. I think she's still a tier 2 unit. It's just like the lower end of tier 2. So next to Jiu, probably higher than Jiu though. Then we have Noah. Right now, just doesn't see any use whatsoever, right? The negative status archetype, well, good on paper, has just been power crept by environment, right? There's no environment to use it on. Probably next to Willow or Anan Lee. I'll put her next to Willow. Higher than Willow, probably. And we have Aleph, right? So much happening with Aleph's kit. Another core piece of what makes the impromptu team so strong. High amounts of roll compression. So probably below Lucy. The thing is, like a lot of the impromptu units, right, doesn't have a lot of flexibility into other teams, right? Kiparina is really the only exception. And then we have Recoleta. Recoleta has a strong niche in reveries, and I mean, you could argue that the 600 meter of Wailing Wall as well. She does suffer from being mineral, and the ritual team's overall DPT is probably one of the lowest, if not the lowest in the meta archetype. I would say her importance is higher than Voyager though. And Voyager is really getting bullied here. Then Hizabeth. Top 3 when it comes to favorite units. Thing is, she doesn't have much of a environment beyond reveries, right? And she does really well there at cheesing the stages. So stronger and more useful than Kikanya and Voyager, right? Yeah, that looks fine to me. And Kiparina, my favorite unit in the game. Extreme levels of roll compression, doesn't use Moxie, auto dispel CC, flexible on literally every single team bar the blood tie, the archetype, right? The best sustain in 3.2. The best sustain in 3.2. It has been for quite a while. Probably the highest tier 0 character. Ulrich. Amazing dynamo support unit. He has amazing burst damage output as well, so utilized in pretty much all environments and can be used on all dynamo teams. Just an amazing support. I think here is, yeah, that looks fine. Now, Nautica. Like, what can I say about Nautica that hasn't already been said about her, right? She has access to literally every kit in the game, all compressed into passives, right? That a main DPS would want, you know? Pretty much used everywhere. Her damage remains relevant. If you have the correct, support structure. Amazing, just an amazing character kit design. I will say though that starting from 3.2 is where we see Blood Tithe's relevance diminish a little because of her inability to participate in Main's Bulletin too well. But for every other content, right, still insanely strong. Tier 0 probably probably under Flutter Page, I would say. Still very much meta. And then Moldir, who is a premium sort of ritual archetype support. She has an amazing kit. Just doesn't have the team to utilize it that well. I would say she's tier 1, probably next to her sister Lopera. In terms of the actual kit itself, better than Lopera. But this is a little subjective here. I think she belongs next to her sister. And then Ezio. Insanely versatile unit. Insanely versatile. He's fallen off though quite a bit since his damage is proportional to the amount of damage his team receives or he receives, right? When he puts up his counter and taunts. Still a solid tier 0.5 main DPS. Probably somewhere between here somewhere, right? Despite the virtue of being so versatile, probably higher than Lucy, he will see a resurgence later on though. And then we have Cassandra. Very, very versatile. What can I say about Assassin's Creed, right? They're just all versatile. They can play 3 different specs at once, right? Very versatile support, has so much use in Reveries. If you've seen any sort of the bleed or the stun build, she's absolutely insane in Reveries. She's the core support to Ezio. She's tier 0.5, I think. I think she's above Elif. Or maybe yeah, above Elif. Doesn't really hold the level of importance as a main DPS or a meta archetype support position though, right? Actually, maybe behind Aleph would be more correct. Yeah. And then we have one of my favorite characters, Sentinel. Sentinel, her value in the Blood Tithe archetype really is underappreciated, right? The reason why I say that is because people default to simulation-based, DPT calculations, right, on a spreadsheet. So they compare her often with like Flutter Page, and I think that's a little disingenuous, right? Her output's decent and her bullets are great as well. She's lower than Marcus, but I think she belongs in the tier 0.5 bracket. Okay. Then we have Karen. Now Karen is really such an amazing character just from his kit alone. I mean, I spent hours trying to present the kit in a way that's it's absorbable, but there's so much going on there. not only that, but he's just fun to play, right? And it feels rewarding when you can actually ult on him and clear the board of like his cards. He's up there next to Kipperina for me. Well, not next to Kipperina, but definitely in tier 0. With the way that Brume and Corvus is so relevant in the meta at the moment, Karen is undeniably, a tier 0 character. He can even be used outside of like the Dynamo archetype if he can execute or he can reap to keep his consternation stacks high enough. But just an overall amazing character. Robuska, I think Robuska would be tier 1 just from the throughput alone, but she actually has such a unique kit, right? She has like the death prevention as well as HP increase. So higher than T1. I think she's by virtue of being a sustain unit, she's probably next to Semmelweis here. I think that's a good position. And she can flex as well, right? Not just being a sustain to the blood type archetype, but she can flex to multiple teams as well. And we have Corvus. Corvus is just so great at what she's at her niche. Is the thing. She's the strongest mains bulletin character in a meta where mains bulletin is the premier endgame, especially in 3.2. She's clunky to use elsewhere, right? But probably for the next few patches going forward, she's going to be at sort of the high end of tier 0.5, I think, right? If you have her below Anjo, I think, right? What is correct? She doesn't have much universality. She's just very good at what she does if you can play her properly. Now Beryl. Beryl. I put 3.3 here. Just switch that to 3.2. Beryl is, I think if you've played her extensively at P0 now, like you've had a bit of time with her, right? You're probably aware of her pain points by now, right? If you go back to sort of my my previous pull plan videos or just videos where I'm explaining Lingering Glow in general, she wasn't a must pull before we got Marsha, right? So in this patch, while she's strong in Reveries and Wailing Well and Mains Bulletin, right? It doesn't change the fact that she's a glass cannon, which is something that I really stressed back when CN was on 3.2. Even with the resonance investment, so that becomes mandatory for her as well. So in 3.2, I think she's above Corvus because she can participate in a lot more in-game environments, right? She can be utilized a lot more. Just keep it in the back of your mind that Blue Park is going to release more units for Lingering Glow, right? And last character for 3.2. 3.2. Which is Brume. Brume is the strongest P0 main DPS in the game by a country mile, right? She's a must pull. She's used in 3.2 mains, but she's not used in other mains. But beyond that, she crushes literally every other endgame content, right? Reveries, Wailing Well, in 3.3, Tides of Thought. Um, her like probably has like the baseline damage of a character that will release in like patch 3.7, right? She's that far ahead um, in terms of how strong her actual damage output is. So she's tier 0. I would put her above Nautica at the moment, purely on a output based judgment, right? She's gonna stay relevant for a very, very long time. Okay, unless they specifically target her her channeling like they did in 3.3. Okay, let me just take a look at this. All right, that looks good enough, right? I won't have too many people that would get upset at me over this, right? So let's sort of dude, I'm so bad at using this. Let's sort of copy paste this and onto 3.3. On to 3.3. Not a lot more to go. Okay, so the new end game here in 3.3 is Tide of Thoughts, right? You make your own boss and you try to score as much as possible through, increasing the modifiers, right? So starting off, we have Euphoria and Enli. Out of left field, we get a plant-based impromptu unit. Provides a control option and a static defensive buff. She's usable everywhere, but her output really is dependent on there being a recycling of trash mobs, right? She also, if she's used as like the third support of an impromptu lineup, she has no way of helping to direct where the impromptu is being targeted at. So probably the highest tier 2 unit. Yeah, she can be used in Wailing Well pretty well. And then we have, let me just delete NLE from down here. Oh god. Okay. We have Mercuria. Mercuria was over here. Dude. I would just use tier list maker, but you can't do this sort of like 3-in-1. So I have to end up doing it this way. So Euphoria Mercuria. Just better overall now. Does significant damage. Elevates sort of the rank up team's overall DPT. So yeah. And she's also the go-to option for a pure single target fight using impromptu as well, but not many points I would give for that. She rises, right? She was like somewhere here. She rises in her sort of position in tier 1, I think. Is basically what it is. She's going to be next to Melania, I would say. And then we're going to bring down Marcus and as well as Sentinel, right? We can't just bring down, good grief, just bring down Marcus only. Bring down Sentinel as well. Okay. So individually speaking, Marcus is better, but when paired with Argus, Mercuria and Argus are better, right? I hope that kind of is clear. Okay. Then we have Marsha. Marsha. She joins the Lingering Low team, right? And then she now elevates Beryl into a higher position here, right? Probably the highest tier 0.5 unit now. Yeah. On top of that, though, Marsha herself is extremely universal. She's got a broken sort of Moxie engine, right? She doesn't necessarily have to do anything to gain Moxie, and when she does use abilities, she gets double. Or if she uses her ult, she can get even more. It's just broken in that sense. And then her damage output as a support unit is also broken. Very strong if you actually like increase her resonances and whatnot. Her buffs are also incredible. She has auto shields, right? And that comes, the shields themselves come with further damage mitigation. I'm trying to think. She prevents crowd control for one instance of crowd control, right? And then cleanses the crowd control if it gets through at the start of the round, I think. Just such a good unit. Like, just so absurd. The single most important unit to pull for at the start of 2026 by a country mile, right? If there's any unit that you pull within the first 3 months of this year, it has to be Marsha. Okay. Now, Igor isn't quite quite that, or quite even what we expected, right? Or wanted as a ritual update in the form of a main DPS, but he's still decent. He's usable in Reveries and Wailing Well. His P0 performance for a mains bulletin stage that was catered for him is quite underwhelming at P0. I am not gonna lie. Even with his like preferred setup with his daughters as well as Marsha, right? So it's probably correct to put him in tier 0.5. Just from a DPT output perspective, he is stronger than Ezio. Yeah, but under impromptu. He doesn't, quite hold the level of importance of these other mostly support units, right? Okay. Let me just, what do we change here? I don't know if Cassandra in 3.3 is still T0.5. I'm gonna leave it at that. But everything else, because we're moving away from this sort of Reveries and Wailing Well centric endgame now, right? We're moving far past that now at this point, into the mains bulletin loop as well as the Tide of Thoughts loop, right? So we'll copy. Is that getting all of it? Copy that and move on to, oh my god, I didn't copy it, to 3.4. Okay. Okay, we have Toothfairy, Euphoria Toothfairy, who is the core support. She's the core support for the plant impromptu team. You can watch my analysis in the previous video regarding Toothfairy. She's tier 0.5. She's not quite tier 0. She can be utilized very well in both Star Impromptu as well as being a core unit in the plant in Paper Heron's team, but I would say she's above Corvus, right? So here is the patch where Corvus is probably going to start showing her age, and we're going to move beyond the sort of Spirit of Flatus, what is it? Mains bulletin fights going forward. Right. Then we got Euphoria 6. So Euphoria 6 is down here at the very bottom with the rest of the tier 3 units before his Euphoria. So he got updates to both his buffs and debuffs, right? I might make a video about how much stronger he is now. He auto puts up defensive buffs as well. And his damage changes with his ult isn't really that strong as you might think, because his Moxie requirement, if you go all the way and unlock his Euphoria 4, is higher now. Right? He uses Moxie instead of Euphoria now, I believe. I think universally, thinking about 6 now as a support, stronger than Cassandra. Stronger than Cassandra. Stronger than Cassandra. Maybe even stronger than Aleph now. We're gonna move these characters down a little bit. So I think Aleph, it won't be wrong of me to say that Aleph has moved down to tier 1 now. We'll keep Barcarola in her current position. But I think 6 is a unit that's probably being slept on. Let me just think. Yeah, his Euphoria is definitely like a sleeper Euphoria. Once Cheng Heguang comes out, we're gonna see whether or not, you know, his buffs are worth it, or if people even take to 6. I might be wrong putting him here in 0.5 actually, but I think he's still stronger than Aleph, which is saying a lot, because I think he's a lot more universal in terms of what he can provide. Now, yeah, I think this is correct. He's not quite 0.5. Right? We're still uncertain as to whether or not he has a core team that he can be used in, right? Then we have Willow, who's down here in tier 3 as well. Okay. So Willow finally got that update, right? From being that like super passive dot applicator, and kind of like you kind of watch things rot, and there's really no environment for that sort of play style, right? Versus now where she actually has burst through her dots. Basically the aim now is to like channel her ult sort of indefinitely, which if you consider the poison team as a whole, right, with Willow, Tuesday, Jessica, and not Sotheby, but probably like Kiparina or Marsha, right? They've definitely gone up a lot in terms of DPT. I probably in tier 1 now. I think between sort of Mercuria and Melania sounds about correct. Okay, let me just move things down. That doesn't look. Mercuria and Melania. Yeah. Because, right, Melania's position here is mostly defined because of her ability to be a roaming support for a lot of ultimate-based teams. And then Mercuria's position here is as a general buffer. I think, yeah, I think this is perfect for Willow, actually. Okay. Liang Yue. Liang Yue, right, right here. Crap. She was in tier 2. All right, let me tell you a story about Liang Yue. Her DBT, Liang Yue's DBT has skyrocketed. This is probably going to be another Brume Andrew situation, except it's going to be with Cheng Heguang. Once Cheng Heguang actually releases, we'll have a more definitive sort of understanding of her placing. But right now, even lacking Cheng Heguang and using like Flutter Page and Mercuria, or Flutter Page and 6, still incredibly strong TBT output, rivaling that, you might be surprised here, but rivaling that of the Lingering Glow archetype, right? Even with Marsha. So automatically here, her attacks become follow-up, right? And her like the damage profile, like the way that she's scaling now, is so good because of the amount of penetration she's able to accumulate. So that really helps against these extremely high defensive bosses, right? Basically, how we play her now is that we funnel everything into Liang Yue. She's honestly like the unit that I'm like most excited for in patch 3.4. Right, we have her coming out on the 12th of February, and I don't have her currently on my account, so I have to use her in Reveries. She's part of the Euphoria pool. Yeah, I'm gonna conservatively put her next to Beryl. I'm not gonna put her above Beryl just yet. But keep in mind that this is conservative. She might end up becoming the strongest 0.5 unit, or even going, yeah, depending on how the mains bulletin landscape goes in 3.5, she might even be higher than Nordica as well, right? She shows really good performance in Tide of Thoughts without Cheng Heguang. So scary potential on this unit. I'm very excited for Liang Yue. Now, Paper Heron. God, Paper Heron, I've done an in-depth analysis for her. She's basically what makes the plant impromptu work, right? Without her, it doesn't work. Her multipliers through, her buffs and her array are insane. Her version of impromptu is ridiculous as well. In terms of how her DPT looks, just starting off the bat, extremely strong, and maintaining and growing that DPT over 10 rounds, and not really falling off ever. The caveat is that you want to have a strong Toothfairy alongside her, right? You could also argue that her team, the opinion is split on this, by the way. Some people don't think that there's going to be more plant impromptu units that are going to be released, whereas some think that like myself, that there's definitely going to be another plant impromptu unit that's going to be released. I just think that it's going to come not next patch, but probably in 3.6 or after the collaboration. So Paper Heron, just an incredibly strong unit, above Brume, right? DPT shows that she's on par with Brume's damage output, slightly less, but then again, that's DPT. You also have to think about the fact that through the use of Ann and Lee, we have a lot more. So I would say I would bring Ann and Lee up now, probably to this position. But through the use of Ann and Lee, through the use of Kipperina, it's like the defensive portion of this team is insane. The output portion is insane. The burst is insane. The ramping is good. So there really isn't a deficient side to this. Why did I put her here? Oh, okay. No, she's correct. There really isn't anything deficient with this team. And she's one of the easiest characters to pilot as well. Yeah. And finally, we have Cheng Heguang. We know from his kit alone that he's going to be tier 0.5 at minimum. Okay. We just don't know what his multipliers will look like and how good the overall performance of Liang Yue and Cheng Heguang's synergy is going to end up being. But with how strong Liang Yue is now, and how Cheng Heguang sort of reinforces or complements the card or the deck or the AP sort of usage, I just don't see any way other than like they're both going to be either high end of 0.5 or Cheng Heguang might even be tier 0 in terms of how universal he ends up becoming. I think it really does lean towards another Brume Andrew situation here with these two. I'm not gonna place him just yet because people will take a screenshot of this and sort of think, you know, I put him in tier 0.5 later on when he releases. So, but for the moment, just know that tentatively he's going to be at tier 0.5 with the potential to be tier 0, right? So that was long. That was long, but hopefully you found some value in that. Feel free to leave your own opinions. Obviously, this is very subjective to me and like to you know, how I see the meta. But I'm obviously open to discussion on everything. So yeah, that's it from me. Till next time.